Welcome to this episode of the Maine Challenge. Today we scratch the surface of criminal justice reform and what it means and our Department of Corrections. It's a huge issue and we could do 20 shows on it. But today we talked to some of our representatives on the Criminal Justice Committee, and then we talked to some people with some real lived experience who are working on trying to help people as they get out and as they get in and what needs to change. And then we have a little conversation at the end about my thoughts about our correction system. Stay with us. It's a really important piece. Criminal justice reform is a civil rights issue of our time. Hi, and welcome to this week's edition of the Maine Challenge. I am really excited to have with us today as our guests three incredibly outspoken truth tellers around the issue of corrections, sentencing, and actually what's happening in our correction system, or more importantly, what's not happening. What is it that is supposed to be corrected that actually this system is not correcting? We have Representative Charlotte Warren, who is the chair of the Criminal Justice Committee in Maine, and we have Representative Victoria Morales and Representative Grayson Lookner, both of whom are members of that committee and have dedicated much of their life, both in and outside the legislature, to bringing justice to those who tangle with the correction system, tangle with our law enforcement system, and beyond. So thank you all three of you for joining us. I really appreciate it. Sort of the theme of what I want to talk about today with you is sort of what the correction system is not correcting, what we are not doing. And I just want to read to start us off, and then I'll turn it over to you. I just want to read what the mission statement of the Maine Department of Corrections is, which is the following. The mission of the Department of Corrections is to reduce the likelihood that juvenile and adult offenders will reoffend by providing practices, programs, and services which are evidence-based and which hold the offenders accountable. So that is what they say they're doing. And what I'd like to know from you is, I'll start with you, Charlotte. How's it going? How do you think they're doing?
Thank you, Betsy. Thank you for having us on today. First of all, I would say that if you look at Maine's return to custody rate, or the rate at which folks are reincarcerated, we're not doing very well. And we would receive an F grade, and actually Maine Department of Corrections, we have received an F grade on multiple different tests. But I want to back up a little bit, because really from the very beginning, you can't use this system of locking people into small cells to deal with what really is the issue for the majority of folks that we have incarcerated in this state, and that is mental health issues and substance use disorder issues. The solution for both of those sets of issues, behavioral health, the solution is more connection, not less. It's a healing of trauma, not creating more trauma. So right off the bat, we struggle to find the funds to give people what they need. And the last resort, and the one that we don't seem to have any problem funding, is prisons and jails. And when I say we don't have any trouble funding, I want to let you know that one of the things we all have been working on is trying to get less money put into prison and jails and get money put into mental health services, substance use disorder services, right? And it's not a normal phenomenon that people on a committee are asking for less money to come to their committee's work. But the three of us, that's really what we're doing. Yeah. So I'll stop there, but just backing up, it's a solution that shouldn't even be designed to treat the problems that really are filling our jails and prisons.
Yeah. So Victoria, I know you do a lot of work within the prison, and I want to talk a little bit more about that. But let me just ask you to follow up on Charlotte's issue, which is, or not Charlotte's issue, the issue that Charlotte raised, which is us not providing services, and the jails really becoming the de facto mental health service provider and the de facto substance abuse provider, which they are not trained for, which they are not meant to do. They're not designed for. So what kind of impact do you think that's having on the people who are incarcerated?
I think it's harming them. I mean, to Charlotte's point, what they need is not isolation in cells with no access to therapeutic treatment.
Grayson, I know you know and see every day the statistics, right? So why is it so difficult? What is the public and the legislative and the administrative addiction, if you will, to this system when by every measure it's broken? Why can't we break through that? Why aren't we breaking through that?
Thank you, Betsy. That's an excellent question, and I wish I had a simple answer. And I think it is systemic, and there are a number of issues that just even within the legislature that make it difficult, because we're the criminal justice committee, so we deal with the best committee, by the way. So we deal with issues of, what are considered criminal behavior, law and order, public safety, those sorts of things come to our committee. But as soon as we start talking about housing, that's a different committee that goes to labor and housing. As soon as we start talking about mental health services, so that's going to HHS, that's not in our committee. So our committee doesn't have jurisdiction over so many of the issues that we really need to be focusing on if we're serious about, quote unquote, correcting behavior or whatever that means, or restoring people to sort of functioning within our system. We know the routes to prevention and diversion, and it's all the things that Victoria and Charlotte have been talking about, housing and mental health services. One of the reasons I sort of got politicized in the first place is I was studying at USM for a graduate degree in mental health counseling and social work. And I would just hear in that program, there was this, we would talk about the history of mental health services in the state of Maine and how we moved away in the 80s from, this model of institutionalization for people experiencing mental health and substance use, where we would just, put people in AMHI, the Augusta Mental Health Institution, sort of lock them up and throw away the key and let them languish for decades, years or decades sometimes on end. And we just, rightly discovered that was a really inhumane and ineffective way of dealing with mental health. So the idea was we're supposed to take money out of institutions and put it into community integration services, of which there are a number of great providers in the state of Maine. They're just underfunded, where you have supported housing and supported employment and supported X, Y, and Z, and you help people integrate into the community. And that's not what happened. We took that money and I don't know where it went. It went into tax breaks for billionaires. It went into more money for policing. And I think, it's sort of, if we're not investing in, we have to think about public safety as a whole spectrum. So it's housing, it's mental health, it's education, it's all these things that factor into public safety. So if we're thinking about public safety, we have to be investing in those things and not just in, the treating the symptoms. And when people start acting out of desperation, they have nowhere else to turn. That ends up becoming a criminal offense, unfortunately.
Why is it so hard to get people to think of a new way or a new, as Grayson, as you said, a new definition of public safety? What's the addiction to a 6x8 cell and bars? Charlotte?
Well, fear is a very powerful motivator, right? Fear is a very, very powerful motivator. It goes right to someone's gut. And we're really talking in language that more engages your brain, right? It's thinking, but we're not taking you right to your gut, right? I mean, listen, if incarceration worked, we would be the safest place on earth, right? The United States is 5% of the world's population, but we are 25% of the world's incarcerated population. If it worked, we would be the safest place. Most people understand that what we're doing isn't working, But then when you bring out the fear, it's very difficult. And that is what we are seeing in this state right now.
So Victoria, is there a way, a pathway to ignite the compassion? Like, I'm hopeful, I'm not around this issue necessarily, but that we are on this cusp in of moving from this fear, hate-based government and society, basically, to maybe opening the door to some compassion and kindness and hope. Do you see a pathway there, or do you feel, or is there a different kind of fear that we instill that's going to move us forward?
It's a very good question. I only see a pathway there in Maine right now if the administration is willing to work in a transparent fashion with the legislature, with the community organizations, with the young people who have experienced the system and the adults who have experienced the system. Because I think ultimately we have similar goals, not all the same, but similar goals, but change is so hard. And it's very hard to work within a system that you're being told has harmed people when you personally have tried to do your best work. And so I think people's personal feelings, which I understand, and no one who's trying to do this work is saying these people who work in the system are bad. Nobody, but we're learning as evolution, and we have new evidence and we study. And so if we are able to have those conversations and realize that we are ultimately all moving towards the same goal, I think only then can we really make some change. But I think to Grayson's point about redefining what public safety is, because I think that we've been, we aren't up to speed with what that means with the public. Mm-hmm. Because, what is public safety? It means reducing recidivism, which is less crime, which means less victims, right? With less people getting hurt. So that's public safety. So how do we get to public safety? What do the experts say about that? What does the research and the data and the science say about that? So then once we have that, which we already do, because in the juvenile system, we have the data, our system has been assessed a number of times already, so we know what to do. We have to have the political will to get there. And that doesn't only involve the DOC, right? Because they are at the end of the road when all the other systems fail. It does involve the police, the Maine State Police and the local police, because they're the ones who arrest. It does involve the district attorneys and the assistant district attorneys, because they're the ones who make the decisions to prosecute. Mm-hmm. And it involves lawmakers, because we set that bar. And I think the biggest piece there is when we have reform efforts to meet best practices, to meet the evidence-based recommendations for reducing recidivism and creating less victims, those reform measures are opposed by these systems folks saying we have to protect victims, so therefore we have to incarcerate people. And so then we're stymied because we're not transparent and talking to each other.
Yeah, so it sounds like breaking down those barriers and those silos to really say what, and a redefinition, a redefinition of public safety, a redefinition, and paying attention back to Charlotte's initial point of what works, to keep, what's that definition of crazy, keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, right? I just want to say thank you to the three of you for being the truth tellers about this work and to being the truth tellers about this system. We are very excited in our next segment to talk with some folks who are working on both recovery and reentry and who have been within the system themselves and are going to share firsthand what they see and what they think needs to change immediately and in the long term. So Representative Warren, Representative Morales, Representative Lookner, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives, and thank you for the work you're doing, and whatever you need, cookies, coffee, whenever you need it to help keep doing this work, we'll give that to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I am really honored and excited to be talking with the three gentlemen on the stage. Thank you for joining us. We have Peter Lehman and Bruce Nodden and Marshall Mercer, all of whom have been involved in some aspect of the correction system, from when people get in, how they get in, being in, and getting them successfully out. And as you know, part of the show is really talking about what our corrections system is not correcting, because we know that it's broken. And you all know every day what's wrong and what's broken with it. And so I would love to hear some of your perspectives. The other thing is that you all represent hope. You all represent what we are doing, and not what you are doing to try and help people once they have been in the system to get out and to re-enter in a way that works. So I want to start, Marshall, with you, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, no
and
problem.
just sort of a little bit about your story and what didn't work and what might be working now.
So when I got out of prison, I didn't have a recovery community ready, right? I didn't have any of those things. I didn't even know that a recovery community even existed until like almost a year afterwards. But when I first got arrested when I was 16, it was because there was coke found in my car. I didn't even know it was in my car. I hated drugs, but I still got arrested and I went to jail. And when that happened, that did something different to me, right? So I had a mother that abandoned me because of drugs, so I was already hating drug addicts and drug dealers, and I didn't know my friends were even hustling. I was playing baseball. I was trying to do the right thing because my life was already messed up as it was. So fast forward, getting out of prison, when I got out of the rise, actually it was a community that came around me. I found a community, or a community found me, but that was just it. I needed a community, someone to show me how to get a license or normal stuff. Here I am, damn near 40 years old. I don't even know anything about taxes or working. When I got out, I was on Social Security because I have 2 club feet. I was born addicted to heroin, cocaine. I overdosed and died from birth because my mom and heroin was bad. And I get out with this whole brand new identity, and I get off Social Security. I start working a 9 to 5. I have a community around me, not treating me like the person I used to be, but building me up, showing me how to survive. And that's what it was. It was a community, not the prison system. The prison systems kept on bringing me down. Not that the prison systems ain't getting better, but that's the whole thing. Now we're able to have these communications, right? We got Bruce down the bringing a board of people together, having talks. It's the same thing with the community, right? They didn't know who I was, this community, but they loved me. My past community just saw who I used to be and never, right? But it's different now. If we come to the table and we have communications, we don't see black.
Yeah.
We don't see all these other things that divide us. We see human.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. Someone treated me like a human for the first time in my life, and I fell in love.
Wow, that's amazing. So Bruce, I know that you help a lot of folks with the reentry, and one of the things that the legislator shared with us earlier was that so many people, just as you said, Marshall, don't have a community to come out to, so they go back to what they know. They go back to who knew them, and they go back to the same place, because when you don't have housing, when you don't have a place to go, when you don't, when there's not a new community, what do you got to go back to what you know. So is that something that you see, and is that something that you folks are helping with?
The answer is yes. We see it every day, and we're helping. But I think when we go to sleep at night, when I go to bed at night, I'm not thinking about what we've accomplished. I'm more thinking about the folks that we missed. And it was pointed out to me that with the numbers of people that we actually get to meet with when they're inside prior to releasing, and then the folks that we work with when they release from prison, we may be having contact with 10% of the population of folks that are releasing. And we're a small nonprofit. We started out as a volunteer-only organization. Nobody was being paid right up until January of this year. So we've been working for 3 years doing this work just as volunteers. And the Department of Corrections has come to rely in some ways upon us and upon the work that we do, and certainly recognize it for what it is. But we're missing so many people. And the capacity and the funding for what we do, and not just what we do, but what the community does. That's what we do. We connect people to community. It's kind of what Marshall was talking about. It's connection. Connected to resources, connected to recovery, connected to family. That's what we're doing. We're engaging the community. Community's ready.
Yeah.
The community wants to do this. But if we can't make contact with these people while they're still inside, then we can't make those connections. If we're just waiting for them to get out and waiting for, it's just, like Peter will say, his head just exploded when he got out. There's just so much hitting you after not making any decisions at all while you're in prison, very few in a day,
Right.
to we take for granted that we make thousands of decisions every day.
Right.
And just preparing somebody for that has such an amazing effect, and surrounding them with a team of people from the community brings that anxiety level down so much, and just gives them that opportunity to succeed, right? But also, the plan isn't going to be perfect.
No, right.
Things are going to happen.
Right.
And that's where those peer supports and the community are there to say, no problem.
Yeah, right.
We're gonna keep going with this
Right.
thing. You made this plan, not us.
Yeah.
This is your plan. And so now let's just pick up the pieces and keep moving on, just like we all do in our
I know,
lives.
every day.
Yeah.
And I think that piece of we're not going to give up on you. You know, like, okay, we all make mistakes. So Peter, you're doing work with folks largely inside who are already there, and talk a little bit about what you're doing and what you're finding, you know, again, about what corrections isn't correcting.
First time I came to Thomaston, which is where I live,
Yeah.
I was in shackles and going to the old state prison in Thomaston. I'd made some serious mistakes and was doing a 6-year sentence. Took me about a week to meeting people and looking around and the whole business to realize that this was a dump. You know, you can call dumps sanitary landfills, and you can make up all fancy names, and you can call prisons correctional facilities and all that, but it doesn't change what they are. And the people I was meeting are people who've been discarded, who'd been thrown away, and nobody ever wanted to see them again.
Yeah.
So when we're working with guys, I sat with a guy last night at Bolduc, where I go and do have office hours, NPRN office hours on Thursday evenings. And you know, he was just anxious, incredibly anxious. He didn't want to be back. He didn't want to fail again. He knew how that felt.
Yeah.
He'd been there before. This was not the first time. And he was, you know, anxious and scared.
Yeah.
And the best thing that I could say to him, and it really resonated with him, is that's okay. You know, it shows you're alive. It shows you're paying attention. You should be anxious. That makes complete sense. Let us keep you company while you do that. You know, I mean, when I got out, I remember standing in front of a grocery aisle, in a grocery aisle in the supermarket, and it just was overwhelming.
It just seems so inhumane, but also non-commonsensical to take people who are in trauma and traumatize them more, put them in trauma again, and then expect them to succeed. I mean, there's nothing about this system, it seems, that works.
I really appreciate that we're talking about trauma, because we as an organization offer a support group that's called Recovery from Incarceration. And the thing is, we're always talking about recovery, and most of these folks that we're encountering are in recovery from substance use disorder of some sort.
Yeah.
And they'll say, well, you know, I really wasn't into drugs, or I wasn't really into alcohol, and it's like, but yeah, that may be true, but you could really use recovery supports for having been incarcerated. And that trauma of incarceration. If you didn't have trauma when you went in, you will have
Certainly
trauma
have
in your
it
life
while
now.
you're there, right? Yeah.
And living on past, because folks don't understand the most horrific stories that I've ever heard about things that have happened, watching people die in horrific ways that people have witnessed.
Yeah.
And also some who have been tormented by certain groups within the prison. That's part of it, but also just being there is traumatic.
Yeah. Well, and as Peter said, and you've said, Marshall, being in a situation where all choices are taken away from you, and then all of a sudden being dumped out, and when you have a million choices to make, and it's just like, we wouldn't do that to We wouldn't do that to an animal.
And this is where Marshall's community comes in, and
Yeah.
that's what we're talking
Yes.
about.
The system was created at a time where we feared certain cultures of people. So we designed it to fit certain people out of the society and put them away. Well, I think the biggest problem is we're afraid to admit that. Hey, we did this purposely, we didn't know, and now we have to fix it. So we can just come out, because we're not blaming you. We just want to come to the table and figure out how we can fix this out so our children don't have to go through this.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. We made a mistake as a society. Now, as a society, we have to correct that. Not the jail systems, not the police, not the social workers. We collectively,
Yep.
as humans, gotta correct this. That's all I got.
Well, thank you. We could talk for a long time, and I will come back and talk. We will talk more, because this is not a 15-minute conversation. It's not a half an hour conversation. And I am so grateful to each of you for your life's work and for your lives, and not just what you do, but who you are.
Oh, and you said something earlier. Yes, you're part of this. We.
Yes,
Not
exactly.
you guys and us.
No,
We.
us. Exactly.
We.
We are all part of this.
We.
We are going to do this together, and people need to know that they matter and that they're
Yes.
loved, and everybody counts.
And if you don't, I love you.
All right, you got that, buddy. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I've been thinking a lot doing this episode about what needs to be corrected in our correctional system. And what needs to be corrected is our system and our attitudes and our thoughts about how we approach people whom the system has failed. Our systems have failed all of the people who end up in this correctional facility and the jails across the state that then feed the prisons in this state. 80% of the people in this building and in all the jails across Maine have a mental health diagnosis and are taking some sort of mental health prescription drugs. Those people don't need bars. They don't need to be in a 4x6 jail cell or 6x8 jail cell and be re-traumatized. They need services. They need support. They need help. They need to know that they belong. Every single one of them has had some adverse childhood experience, which has led them to a series of events, some unlucky, some hard, that have led them here. And yet we have a system whose number one thing is to not correct people. They don't need correcting, but to punish people and take them away, put them away without resources. You know, there is a tribe in Africa, and what they do when someone has committed a crime is they circle that person and they tell them all the wonderful things about themselves, because they say they have forgotten who they are. People are good people. We have to start there and then say, how have we failed them, and what can we do to help make them feel connected and supported and have the resources that they need and loved. They don't need to be behind bars. It's time for reimagination. It's time for a little more love. And it's time to correct our attitude about how we care about people who need our support.